Today on Your Government in Action, where we cover bills, votes, records, and how it affects you. 45 days after September 11th, Congress passed a law that quietly changed who can read your records, and almost nobody had read it first. Imagine your country is in shock. 2,700 people are dead. The towers have fallen. Everyone wants the government to do something, anything, to make sure it never happens again. That is the mood in Washington in the fall of 2001. And in that mood, Congress passed one of the most powerful surveillance laws in American history. It is called the USA PATRIOT Act. The name is an acronym, and it stands for Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. It passed in the Senate by a vote of 98-1. Only one senator said no. The whole thing happened just 45 days after September 11th. The bill was over 300 pages long, and here is the part that should make you pause. Most of the people who voted for it admitted they had not actually read it. Think about that for a second. A law longer than most novels, full of brand new government powers, and the people signing off on it were largely taking it on faith. So today we are going to walk through what this law really does, how it raced through Congress, and why pieces of it still shape your life right now in 2026. We will keep it plain and simple, no legal jargon, just the facts and what they mean for you. Because if you use a phone, an email account, or a bank, this law is about you. And once you see how it works, you will never look at the word security the same way again. So let's start with the basics. What does this law actually let the government do? The Patriot Act is not one single power. It is a giant bundle of them stacked together in one bill. Let's unpack the big ones, one at a time. First, there are roving wiretaps. Before this law, a wiretap was tied to a specific phone line. If the target switched phones, agents needed a new order. A roving wiretap follows the person instead of the phone. So no matter how many devices they use, the tap moves with them. Second, there is a provision known as Section 215. This one let the government collect business records in bulk. We will come back to just how far that went because it became the most famous piece of all. Third, there are national security letters. Think of these as a demand letter the FBI can send all by itself. It can go to your phone company, your bank, or your internet provider. And here is the catch. It does not require a judge to sign off. There is no court order. Worse, the company that receives one is gagged. By law, they cannot tell you that your records were handed over. Fourth, there are sneak and peek searches. These let agents search your home or office and tell you about it later, sometimes much later. And finally, there is the lone wolf provision, which let the government surveil a suspect even without proof they were tied to a specific foreign group. Before this, the rules generally required a link to a known terrorist organization or foreign power. This provision loosened that. Now picture all 5 of these powers together. Roving wiretaps that chase a person across devices. A bulk records power with enormous reach. Secret demand letters with built-in gag orders. Searches you find out about after the fact. And surveillance with a lower bar of proof. Each one on its own is a big deal. Stacked together, they represent one of the largest expansions of government surveillance the country had ever seen. 5 powers, 1 bill, almost no debate. Now here's the question that matters. How does a 300-page surveillance law pass in just 6 weeks? To understand that, you have to remember the fear. In the weeks after September 11th, anthrax was showing up in the mail. Lawmakers were getting evacuated from their own offices. Nobody wanted to be the politician who blocked an anti-terror bill and then watched another attack happen. The Bush administration moved fast. Attorney General John Ashcroft pushed Congress hard to act quickly, warning that delay could cost lives. And Congress did act quickly. The bill went from idea to law in about 6 weeks. Now normally a major bill like this gets months of hearings. Experts testify. Committees debate. Lawmakers read the text. None of that really happened here. The final version landed just before the vote, and it was enormous. Several members later admitted, on the record, that they simply did not have time to read all 300 pages. Some staffers got copies only hours before the vote. So why did almost everyone vote yes anyway? Because the politics were brutal. Voting no looked like voting against keeping Americans safe. President George W. Bush signed it into law on October 26, 2001. The whole sprint, from the attack to the signature, took 45 days. That speed is exactly why critics have argued ever since that the country traded away privacy protections it never really stopped to weigh. Let's look at the actual numbers, because the vote tells you a story all by itself. In the Senate, the vote was 98-1. Stop and think about that. In a body that argues about almost everything, 98 senators agreed. Republicans and Democrats, side by side, only one man voted no. His name was Senator Russ Feingold, a Democrat from Wisconsin. He argued that the bill went too far, that it traded core liberties for a feeling of safety. At the time, his vote looked lonely, even reckless to some. Years later, plenty of people came to see it differently. Over in the House of Representatives, the vote was 357-66. So 66 House members did vote no, but notice the pattern. This was not a party line fight. The yes votes came from both sides of the aisle, and so did most of the no votes. This is one of those rare moments where the usual red versus blue story does not apply. Fear united almost everyone. And that is the lesson worth holding on to. When the whole country is frightened, the normal checks can melt away. The people who are supposed to slow things down, to read the fine print, to ask hard questions, mostly did not. One senator and a scattered handful of representatives stood against a tidal wave. Everyone else got swept along. And it is worth being fair here. The people who voted yes were not villains. They were scared like everyone else, and they genuinely believed they were protecting the country. That is exactly what makes this moment so important to understand. You do not need bad actors to end up with sweeping powers. You just need a frightened nation and a fast-moving bill that nobody slows down to question. So the law passed. The real question is what happened next once those powers were actually used. Here is where the story gets uncomfortable. Take national security letters again. Remember, the FBI can send these with no judge involved. So how often did they use them? Between 2003 and 2006, the FBI issued roughly 192,000 national security letters. That is not a typo. Almost 200,000 demands for private records in just 3 years, with no court signing off. Then came the bombshell. In 2013, a contractor named Edward Snowden leaked a trove of classified documents. They revealed something stunning. Under Section 215 that bulk records power, the National Security Agency had been collecting phone metadata on virtually every American. Not just suspects, everyone, who you called, when, and for how long. The government argued this was legal under the law Congress passed. Many Americans were shocked it was happening at all. The courts eventually weighed in. In 2015, a federal appeals court, the Second Circuit, ruled that the bulk phone program had gone beyond what the law actually allowed. The American Civil Liberties Union had been fighting these programs in court for years. So Congress responded. It passed the USA Freedom Act in 2015. That law ended the bulk collection of phone records under Section 215. Instead, the NSA now has to ask phone companies for specific records, one query at a time. In plain terms, the government can no longer vacuum up everyone's call records by default. It now has to point at a specific target and justify the request. It was a real reform, and it mattered. But here's what you need to keep in mind. That change fixed exactly one program. The bill that started all of this had many moving parts, and most of them were left untouched. So it was only one piece of a much bigger machine. Okay, but you might be thinking this is old news. Why should you care in 2026? Here is why. The USA Freedom Act closed one door, the bulk phone records door, but it left a whole building standing. Many of the other surveillance powers from 2001 are still active law today. National security letters are still a tool. The FBI can still demand certain records from companies without a judge, and the gag order can still keep you in the dark. There is also a separate law worth knowing called Section 702. It lets the government collect the communications of foreign targets without a warrant. But here is the catch for you. When a foreigner emails or calls an American, your side of that conversation gets swept up too. The government calls this incidental collection. To you, it just means your messages can end up in a database you never agreed to. Now think about your daily life. You carry a phone that tracks where you go. You send emails that sit on company servers. Your bank logs every transaction. All of that is data, and federal agencies can reach a lot of it faster and with less judicial oversight than they could before 2001. That is the real legacy of this law. It was sold as a temporary emergency measure. Many provisions were written to expire, but year after year Congress renewed them. A few lapsed briefly during renewal fights, then came back. The emergency faded, the powers stayed, and whether you think that is the price of safety or a step too far, you should at least know it is true. So let's bring it home. The Patriot Act was born out of real fear and real tragedy. It passed almost unanimously in a matter of weeks before most lawmakers had even read it. Some of its most sweeping powers have been reformed. Many others quietly remain the law of the land. The big takeaway is simple. Laws passed in moments of crisis tend to outlive the crisis. The fear fades, but the powers stick around. That is not a partisan point. Both parties built this, and both parties have kept it. Your job as a citizen is to know what your government can do, and to decide for yourself whether that is the right trade. Knowing the facts is how you stay in charge of that conversation. If this breakdown helped you see a law you have heard about 1,000 times in a clearer light, then we did our job. Subscribe to Your Government in Action for more breakdowns like this.